Stop! Before you click away, I need to warn you. What you're about to hear is not a game, it's not fiction. This actually happened. In real life, people reported this story and nobody believed them. Until now, if you get scared easily, leave. This is your only warning. But if you're brave enough to stay, it will be one of the scariest stories you will ever hear in your life. Before we start, subscribe to Mikey HR and hit the like button. If you haven't watched these 2 videos, you've missed out on a lot. You can watch it on the channel after this video. I spend hours finding these stories so you don't have to. It takes 2 seconds, and it means everything. Now, turn off the lights. And let's begin. Have you ever heard of a job called Last Contact? I didn't think so. That's strange. Because without Last Contact, society would collapse within a week. I learned about it the summer after high school while looking through classified job listings. Most were normal: warehouse work, landscaping, retail. Then I found one that read, Last Contact Trainee. No experience required. Must be willing to work with the recently deceased. $2,000 sign-on bonus, $45 hourly wage. That caught my attention. I figured that it was some position at a funeral home, or maybe the morgue. That was fine by me, so I called the number at the bottom of the listing. A dull voice answered the phone by the 3rd ring. Hello. Hello, I'm calling about the Last Contact job listing. I saw it in the paper. Oh yes, what is your name? It's Will. Very well, Will. We will give you a call back in a few days. Thank you. With that, the line went dead. I rolled my eyes and went about my day, thinking I just fell for some prank. The pay should have tipped me off. It was way too good to be true. The next couple of days, I continued my job search. No position offered what the Last Contact one did. Must have called 10 fast food places with no luck. 3 days later, I was shocked to receive a call from a familiar number. Hello? I answered. Hello, Will. Congratulations on becoming the newest member of the Last Contact family. We're excited to have you join us. I was dumbfounded. Thanks. I managed to say, if it's convenient for you, we'd like to begin this coming Monday. Yes, that should work for me. Great. We're assigning you to the night shift. You'll need to be at our call center by 9 p.m. Monday night. After the voice gave me the call center address, it said, Thank you, have a nice day. As I set down my phone, I wondered what exactly I had gotten myself into. Looking back, if I had known what Last Contact was at that time, I probably never would have shown up. Monday came quick. I packed myself a small bag of snacks and lunch, hopped into my crummy car, and crossed town to the call center. The call center itself was a rundown small industrial building next to the train tracks. It had a tiny parking lot lit by a lone, flittering streetlight, and a single light on the building illuminating the walkway to a plain door. Pulling into the parking lot, I took a moment to double-check the address. This was the place. I stepped out of my car and slowly walked to the door. Pulling the handle, I found it to be locked. I stood there for a moment, unsure what to do. A little voice in my head told me to turn back to my car and get out of here. But instead, I gave the door a firm knock. After a short pause, the door swung open. The man who opened the door was short and a little pudgy. He had thinning dark brown hair, long sideburns, and thin glasses that sat low on his nose. He looked tired but not sleepy. Are you Will? He asked. Yeah, that's me. He stretched out his hand to shake mine. I'm Nate. I'll be your trainer for the next few weeks. He ushered me inside. The interior wasn't much nicer than the outside. Directly behind the door was a small entryway with a coat rack and 2 waiting room chairs. The entryway opened into a long hallway which Nate led me down. We passed several doors before Nate opened one and said, "This will be your workspace." I walked into a room barely double the size of a standard coat closet. It was illuminated with a greenish-yellow fluorescent light. A long desk rested against the back wall, which was also home to the only window in the room. On the desk sat an ancient-looking desktop and a telephone. The only other thing in the room was a dusty office chair. Nate looked at me as I stared at the space. "How much did they tell you?" I didn't meet his gaze, but answered not a thing. He sighed and ran a hand through his falling-out hair. "That figures? They never do. Let's go to the break room and talk through it." I followed him to the small break room. Its flickering lights revealed a handful of tables and chairs. 2 30-year-old fridges sat in the corner, as well as several old vending machines, some of which looked like they hadn't been restocked in years. The back wall had large windows that looked out towards the train tracks and the darkness that lay behind them. We sat down at one of the barren tables. Nate slid a paper towards me. "Before we get going, they want you to sign the contract." I looked up at him. "Contract?" "Yeah, you're required to work here for a minimum of 5 years. After that, if you continue, you'll get a $9 raise, but have to sign on for another 5 years." I stared at the sheet and looked back at Nate. Do I have a choice? He smirked slightly and shook his head. Not really. I swallowed and signed my name. As I did, Nate began. "When people die unexpectedly, they get one final phone call. One last contact with the world of the living." I'm sure my face demonstrated my disbelief. Nate gave a weak smile. "I know. Sounds silly, but the reality is that those who are killed or died unexpectedly are given the opportunity for a last call before their soul passes on." He took a drink from his bottle. "It's our job to answer those calls. This job is important for 3 reasons. First, we provide comfort for those who have recently passed. Oftentimes, they don't know what happened and are confused. We give clarity. Second, we gather important information that the dead hold. The dead possess information that must be transferred before they move on. Passwords, locations, military codes, those sorts of things. We gather them and pass the information to the right places. And thirdly, spirits who call and no one picks up tend to become violent and dangerous. We try to stop that as often as we can." I didn't know what to say. "I'm sure you got some questions. Let's see if some calls help give answers," he said as he stood, patted me on the back, and headed out. I followed. We returned to my little room. Nate sat in the chair. "I'll take the calls tonight, but I'll put them on speaker so you could listen in." I nodded. The first call didn't come for about 30 minutes. It was nearing midnight when the first call came. Nate picked up the phone. "Hello, my name is Chris. What's yours?" I was surprised that Nate didn't use his real name. The room crackled with the noise of static, but a cracked monotone voice spoke. "I'm Mike." "Hello, Mike. This is your last contact. I'm sorry to have to tell you, but you have died." The phone went silent. "What? How? What happened?" No, that's not possible." A sad, confused voice finally replied. "Mike." Nate put his head in his hands. "I was driving home. I'm sorry. I was driving home 20 minutes ago. I'm sorry, Mike. We don't have much time. Do you have any passwords or information your loved ones will need?" Gentle sobbing could be heard through the phone. Nate sighed. Mike, please. Your family will appreciate it if you could give me something. The voice on the other end managed to squeak out his banking information and the combination to a safe. He begged Nate to tell his family that he loved them. But Nate only took down the passwords. The call had only been going on for about a minute when the line went dead. Nate put the phone back in its place. He sighed heavily as he said, "They only get 60 seconds, so get as much information as you can. No personal messages make it to the families, so don't bother." "Why did you say your name was Chris?" "Oh, I don't use my real name after the incident last year." I stared at him, hoping he'd elaborate. He didn't. Instead, he then showed me how to create a file for the caller, showing their name, the time they called, and the information they were passing on. Nate glanced at me. "They're not all that easy," he said. The next call didn't come for hours. I could feel myself nodding off as the phone rang. "Hello, my name is Steve. What's yours?" said Nate immediately. A haunting voice responded. "Am I dead?" "Yes, I'm sorry to say you are." "What's your name?" Instead of answering his question, the voice laughed and said, "I found the door." In an instant, Nate hung up the phone and swore under his breath before reaching under the desk and pulling out another phone. He began dialing the number taped to the side. "What's going on?" I cried, trying to sound less scared than I was. "You'll find out soon enough," was the only answer he gave before lifting the second phone to his ear. I could only hear one side of the conversation. "Yeah, it's Nate. We got another one talking about the door." The voice on the other end said something I couldn't make out. Okay, thank you," Nate said and hung up the phone. He let out a breath and turned to me with a fake smile. "How about some coffee?" he said cheerfully before walking out of the room. I followed him to the break room. Nate tried to make small talk as he poured some old coffee for us. As he did, I stared out the window and noticed that standing past the train tracks was a dark figure. A chill went up my spine as I saw it. "Hey, Nate, someone is standing out." He cut me off as he quickly whispered, "Don't look at it. It always shows up after a call like that." "What do you mean?" "Look away," he hissed as he grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. We stared at the dirt wall. Nate was holding his breath. After a few minutes, I heard a gentle tapping on the window. The tapping continued for about 2 minutes before it stopped. Nate said, "We can turn around now. It leaves after the tapping." As we turned around, I could see that the entire window was completely iced over, except for several little dots around the glass. They looked like places where a fingertip had tapped the glass. I looked at Nate. "What is going on?" He shrugged. "Just part of a last contact."
He followed up with, "In the future, just know that the faster you look away, the better. Sometimes it won't even tap if you're fast enough." He then walked out into the hallway. When we got back to the workspace, he turned and looked me in the eyes. "Look, Will, this isn't your standard job. I'm sure you've realized that already. But it's important, and better yet, it pays well. So my advice to you is to keep your wits about you and follow the rules." I nodded and said, "What rules?" He handed me an envelope and said, "Your sign-on check is in there, as well as a few rules. Read them when you get home. Come prepared tomorrow night. I'll be having you on the phones tomorrow night." I took it and put it in my back pocket. The rest of the night was pretty quiet. Around 6 a.m., we got a call from a young woman who hung herself. She wanted her parents to know that she left a note under her pillow and her friends to know her locker combination. 7 a.m. finally came and Nate said, "You did good for your first night. Some nights will be way busier and some nights you'll get no calls at all. It ebbs and flows." "How long have you been doing this, Nate?" He grabbed his coat from the entryway. 12 years, I'm on my third contract. Do you like it? He shrugged. It's a job. We both walked out into the parking lot and waved goodbye as we climbed into our vehicles. When I got home, I collapsed on my bed. Pulling the envelope from my pocket, I opened it, set the check aside, and unfolded the sheet on it was 7 rules. If the caller begins describing the room you're sitting in, terminate the call immediately and leave your workstation for 15 minutes. The dead should not be able to see the living. If you hear breathing before the caller speaks, disconnect immediately. The dead do not need to breathe. If a caller says, "I found the door," end the call and notify a supervisor. If you recognize the caller's voice, remain professional and follow normal procedure. Personal calls are inevitable in this line of work. Under no circumstances should you answer a call that arrives exactly 1 minute after another call ends. Those calls do not originate from the deceased. Should the caller ask to speak with Nate, tell them Nate retired years ago. Do not mention that Nate is sitting 3 offices down. If somebody begs you to send help, transfer them to extension 7 and do not follow up. Setting the page down, I released the breath I was holding and muttered, "What in the world did I get myself into?" I slept till around 3 in the afternoon. When I woke, I hoped what I experienced the night before was just a dream, but the check on my nightstand told me it was all too real. I got up and made myself some breakfast. My mom came into the kitchen and smiled at me, saying, "Hi, honey, how was the job?" I shrugged and said, "It's a job." After a shower, I got into the car and headed to the bank to cash the check. After that, I headed to the bookstore. I figured if I had some slow nights coming, I could at least get some reading in. At home, I watched the news for a while, but had to change the channel when I saw that a school bus went off the road into the river. I couldn't help but think that the day shift would be getting a lot of calls this afternoon. As I pulled into the parking lot, I couldn't help but feel nervous. I had gotten there before Nate did, and when he pulled in, I waved and got out of my car. As we walked in, Nate handed me a copy of his key. "That way you won't have to wait for me," he said with a smile. "Are you ready for this?" I sighed. "I think so," he chuckled. "You'll do great. I'll be right there if you have any questions." That made me feel quite a bit better. As we entered the small workspace, Nate handed me a sheet of paper. "I wrote you a script for the night. Hopefully it'll help." I grinned and said, "Thank you. That makes me feel better." The night was very forgettable. We only had one call the whole night, a drunk driver who hit a telephone pole. I tried to get him to share information, but he was confused and rambled. Right at the end, he started sharing banking information, but the phone cut out halfway through. His 60 seconds were up. "Good try," Nate said. "It takes some practice to get them finished in under a minute. Don't worry about it." "Okay," I sighed. "I'll try." As the sun rose, Nate and I again parted ways in the parking lot. My third night was busy. We had 7 calls in the first 5 hours. I started to feel like I was getting my feet under me. After I finished a call from a stabbing victim, Nate patted me on the back and said, "Man, that was a tough one, but you did really well. Good job." He then moved to the doorway. "I gotta take a piss. Be right back." I took a deep breath and picked up my book for the first time that night. A few moments later, the phone rang. I looked around. Nate was still gone. I gulped and picked up the phone. "Hello, my name is Chris. What's your name?" There was heavy breathing on the other end. "Hello?" I stupidly replied. Malicious laughter filled my ear, and I realized my mistake when a voice said, "Thank you for staying on the line, Will." The line then went dead. Nate walked in a minute later. My face must have been full of fear because he asked, "What's wrong?" I looked at him. It was breathing, and I didn't hang up. He clenched his jaw and muttered, "Well, that's not good." "What do you mean? Did it say your name?" I swallowed and whispered, "Yes." He went pale before slamming the door shut and locking it. He flipped the lights off and whispered to me, "Don't make a sound." I held my breath and sat as still as possible. Down the hall, a door squeaked open. Heavy, wet footsteps tromped down the hall. "Will, where are you?" A dark, almost melodic voice echoed through the hall. Nate held a finger to his lips, telling me to be silent. The steps moved closer. "Will, are you here?" It stopped in front of our door and began to wiggle the doorknob. It smelled like mothballs and bleach. "Will," it giggled to itself, "are you in there?" I jumped as a loud bang rocked the door. Another followed, and another. Nate moved in front of the door. I could see his hands shaking. In a stuttering voice, he said, "Will retired years ago." The noise stopped before the noise shuffled its way back down the hall. A door slammed shut. Nate was nearly hyperventilating as he reached his hand out to turn on the lights. I heard him mutter to himself, "I'll need to update the rules." He turned to me. I've never seen a man look so scared. "It's very important that you always follow the rules. They keep bad things away." I nodded, overcome by fear. Nate let me go home that night. My car was empty but smelled of mothballs and bleach. I wanted so badly to quit. In fact, by the time I got home, I made up my mind that I wasn't going back. But lying on my bed was the contract I signed. The 5-year duration was circled over and over again in red ink. I got the message. That night I slept terribly. I dreamt that I was trapped in my room while my mother stood outside, gently tapping on the window and laughing to herself. That night when I reported for work, I noticed that Nate looked just as tired as me. He nodded when he saw me. "Hey Nate, were you able to sleep?" He gave a weary smile before shaking his head no and taking a drag on the cigarette he was working on. "Why'd you sign the contract 2 more times?" I couldn't help but ask. He puffed hard on his cigarette. "Well, after you hit 10 years, every year after, they promise that a loved one of your choice won't die." I felt like I was beginning to understand. "They can do that?" I asked. He shrugged. "It's worked so far." He flicked his cigarette to the ground before saying, "Let's get to work." As we stepped into the entryway, we were both surprised to see a note taped to the far wall. It was handwritten and said, "Night shift." "We've had some issues on the day shift, so we felt it was right to record what we have learned. Hopefully we can avoid more casualties. Here's what we know. If a caller asks whether the train tracks are still behind the building, answer yes and close the blinds immediately. If the caller thanks you before you have helped them, end your shift immediately and go home by a different route than usual. If a caller asks what time it is, answer incorrectly. The dead lose track of time after passing. Anything that asks for the correct time is trying to synchronize itself with our world. Hope all is well. Good luck." We both stared at the sheet for a while before Nate said, "Well, that's a crummy way to start the shift." "What's it mean?" "It means our job just got a little harder," he said with a sigh. "Come on." He headed to our room and I followed. Between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., we helped 2 different people who overdosed and 1 shooting victim. Nate was walking back into the room with coffee for both of us when I started a new conversation. "Hello, my name is Chris. What's your name?" Static followed, then a small voice. "I'm Carol. Can you tell me the time?" Instinctively, I looked down at my watch, and as I did, Nate gently slapped the back of my head and pointed to the new rules. "Hi, Carol. It's 5 minutes after 6. A loud sigh came through the phone, and Carol hung up. Nate raised his eyebrows slightly. Didn't know they could hang up from their end. We'll have to watch for that.
10 minutes later, every clock in the building displayed the same incorrect time I'd given Carol for exactly 5 minutes. We didn't get another call that night. I spent it reading and walking the halls. I tried the handle of the 7 other doors in the hallway. I'm not sure why. They were all locked, but I could see light beneath one. After walking around for a bit, I returned to the room and I noticed the blinds over the window had been closed, even though neither Nate nor I remembered touching them. The sun rose, and as I drove home, a thought entered my mind. I should write this all down. None of my friends or family would believe these stories if I told them. But maybe someone out there would believe and appreciate my experiences. So, When I got home, I opened my laptop and I started writing. And that brings us to now. I've been a Last Contact trainee for 4 nights now. I'll try to keep you posted throughout my 5 years, but for now, I'm signing off. Oh wait, something is scratching the inside of my closet door. If you're still here, you just made it through one of the scariest stories you will ever hear in the internet. Most people clicked away. You didn't. That means something. I want to know, and do you think this actually happened, or is it just a story? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if this video gave you chills or kept you up at night, hit the like button. It takes 1 second and it tells me you want more stories like this. Subscribe to Mikey Blocks and turn on the bell, because the next story I found is even darker than this one. You don't want to miss it. Until next time, stay safe out there.